It's the week ending Friday the 7th of November, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen the stabbing of 10 people on a train travelling from Doncaster to London, Justice Secretary David Lammy under pressure as 2 more inmates are accidentally released early from prison, and Democrats winning New York as Zohran Mamdani becomes the city's first Muslim mayor. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in The Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team is Jamie Timson and Harriet Marsden, and the senior editor of The Week Junior, Felicity Capon. Also this week, the Edenbridge Bonfire Society is getting its 11-metre effigy of Sir Keir Starmer ready to be burned this weekend. It has the badge Starmer the Farmer Harmer on it. Have any of you ever burned an effigy?
Not that I know of.
Not part of your fireworks celebrations, Felicity?
No, but we were in Lewis a couple of weeks ago and I hadn't realised how seriously they take it, and they have like really old bonfire societies.
It's quite scary in Lewis, I think.
Yeah, it had a spooky vibe, yeah. But also Thomas Paine was there for a while. I didn't realise it was his stomping ground. Cool castle.
Harriet, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
The Maldives going up in smoke.
With each inhalation, smoke brings its more than 5,000 chemical substances into contact with the body's tissues. From the start, tar, a black resinous material, begins to coat the teeth and gums, damaging tooth enamel and eventually causing decay. Over time, smoke also damages nerve endings in the nose, causing loss of smell. Inside the airways and lungs, smoke increases the likelihood of infections, as well as chronic diseases like bronchitis and emphysema.
How do cigarettes affect the body? You can watch the whole thing on Ted Ed's YouTube channel if you fancy a laugh. Harriet, what's the news this week?
Well, this week, or last Saturday actually, the Maldives became the first country in the world to impose a generational ban on smoking. What that means is that from now, anyone who was born on or after the 1st of January 2007, which is everyone here, will not be able to legally smoke or use any tobacco products in the Maldives. And that does include foreigners and tourists as well. And it follows from what they did last year, which was when they just banned vaping and e-cigarettes kind of for everyone. So this is part of a wider push against smoking in the Maldives.
Okay, I mean, you made a jolly joke there. It is, of course, none of us here. You'd have to be, what then, 22, if my maths is correct? Or is it 18? 2025, got my calculator out.
18.
Yeah. 23.
What are you doing on that calculator?
2025, take away 2007. Yes, there we are, 18, yes.
Yeah, I love having to do maths in front of everybody. Yes, anyone under 18 will be banned from smoking or buying tobacco.
Okay, and is that big an issue in the Maldives? People under 18 buying tobacco? That feels like a thing from 30 years ago.
Yeah, so this actually was something that really surprised me about this story. So smoking is a big part of Maldivian culture, although they have banned smoking in workplaces and most public places. But it's a really deeply ingrained habit. And as of 2022, more than a quarter of the population over 16 said they smoked. There's also a big gender disparity. The prevalence is a lot higher among men. But it's also much higher among young people, which is what I thought was really interesting about this story, that actually the prevalence of smoking was significantly higher. So half of the people in the Maldives between the ages of 13 and 15 said that they used tobacco. And they think this is because hookah, which is like a shisha pipe, is becoming much more popular. And vaping had also become much more popular, leading to the ban last year among young people, which has also led to this incremental rise in popularity of normal smoking as well.
Felicity, is this a law that can be enforced, though? You don't want to chuck a whole load of kids in prison, do you? I mean, it's one thing in 10 years' time when they're a bit older.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because I guess this is a world first. It will be, we'll have to see. And I think a lot of other countries will be watching eagerly, especially the ones that very much want to do this or have tried doing this. So New Zealand, no surprises there, was due to become the first country to attempt the same sort of legislation and passed a bill in 2022, but that was scuppered in 2023 when a new government took power. And also it's something that Rishi Sunak, when he was in power, wanted to introduce in this country, a similar law. And that's now, I believe that's now working its way. It's past the Commons and it's working its way through the House of Lords. And that would ban tobacco for anyone born after 2009. So certainly the Maldives is paving the way, but there are other countries who will be taking note of how successful it is. But I mean, like you say, it's that kind of arbitrary cutoff point, isn't it? That some kids would be in trouble for it and other kids whose birthday will be out by a day won't be in trouble for it. And, you know, I remember when Rishi Sunak was talking about it and hoping to introduce it in this country, there were so many thought pieces just like posing all these like completely arbitrary scenarios of someone who would be like a criminal and someone else who would be completely fine just because of when their birthday was.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it, Jamie? You could fast forward 30 years and you could have a 58-year-old sitting down smoking.
Why are you trying to do more maths? That's mad. What a strange thing to do when you've already struggled at the beginning of the...
Whereas the 59-year-old would be allowed to. Is there going to be a copper, and I'm sure they don't use that phrase in the Maldives either, who's going to come past and say, right, I need to see your ID papers because you could plausibly have been under 18 in 2025?
Yes, I mean, it's difficult enough to tell the difference between like anyone's ages. That I think probably that whole, I mean, you only know from the Challenge 25 thing that is in shops and pubs. There's also the question of like the black market. You know, would people just start selling cigarettes on the black market? You know, older people buying them and then selling them to younger people at any age. I think that was the big question when Sunak was pushing it in the UK. I guess the kind of the idea around it is that obviously we know that smoking is bad for you and it's bad for your health, and actually the rates of smoking, if we take the UK as an example, have kind of stagnated in terms of the decline. They obviously had a massive decline, but now it's around 10 to 12% of adults are current smokers. And that progress has slightly flatlined since 2020. And actually, interestingly, smoking rates fell faster in northern England than in the south of England. Basically, the kind of generational restriction was about getting that like last mile sorted. So trying to eradicate the last 10% of people that do smoke. And I mean, I kind of come from the position that people are always going to do it. And it's merely about how you maybe from a like fiscal perspective extract the most amount of money from them in order to pay for the NHS, in order to pay for all of that. Or you say, how do we educate so that kids aren't taking it up, and what education can we give to children for that to be the case? But I mean, everyone is obviously watching the Maldives to see what effect this happens, and it's interesting that that's the guinea pig destination.
Yeah, because the problem, I guess, Harry, is if you take the tax route that Jamie was outlining there and just make it more and more expensive, then obviously it becomes more and more tempting to buy your cigarettes illegally. We've seen the BBC's expose on that just this week, that there are mini-marts all over the country illegally selling vapes and fags to kids. So that would exemplify that issue, wouldn't it? And accelerate that issue almost certainly if they became unaffordable.
Yes. So in the UK, they think that the illegal tobacco market is massively thriving because there's been these 4 increases in tobacco taxes since 2021. So the government has effectively priced smokers out of the legal market because with the high prices of cigarettes, people who still smoke are searching for cheaper alternatives. They think legal tobacco sales fell by 45% in the last few years, but the number of smokers fell by less than 1%. So, you know, they're still smoking. But in the case of the Maldives, the levels of smoking are so much higher. So it's not necessarily that they are trying to eradicate smoking, more that they're trying to achieve something that the smoking ban in the UK, like the ban on smoking in enclosed public places and workplaces did in the UK, which was very, very, very successful because smoking became more publicly, socially unacceptable. Levels of smoking, like Jamie was saying, did decrease massively. Like the broader picture since the ban on smoking came in 2006 or 7 is that it did bring down smoking rates by a lot. So we're not necessarily saying that you're trying to stop everybody from smoking because people will always smoke. But you're trying to significantly reduce it to decrease the impact on the health service. Like in the Maldives, nearly 13% of all deaths, they think, are attributable to smoking. So this is an extraordinary health burden. But in the UK, the problem is that they think that some of the success of eradicating or bringing down smoking levels is kind of about to be reversed, because they've got these planned 50% cuts to kind of local services that fund inpatient tobacco treatment, which is the thing that's been so successful in the north of England. And they think that could really jeopardise progress.
I imagine, Felicity, on The Week Junior, the issue you come up against more these days is not children being influenced to try tobacco cigarettes, but to try vaping. I mean, that's the obvious way in for lots of kids now, isn't it? And this doesn't mention vapes.
Vaping kind of went absolutely crazy and became really, really huge. And then subsequently there was a ban on single-use vapes, I believe. And that was partly because of an environmental impact, obviously, causing so much landfill and just horrible, nasty plastic. But also because even though vaping is better for you than smoking, the long-term effects are not known. There's an awful lot we don't know about vaping and the effects it has on people. Am I right in saying that vaping is more popular than smoking now in the UK?
There are more over 16s using vapes than smoking cigarettes for the first time, as of this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very popular. And you can get all the flavours, and I think that kind of coincides with people wanting to kind of choose their colour and choose their identity and choose their flavour, and that's always been really, really popular. But I think for some people it has been seen as a bit juvenile and adolescent and kind of plasticky. And I think maybe there will be like a return to smoking tobacco because it's kind of authentic and cool, because it's, you know, it's the original thing rather than the kind of like hot pink plastic vaping thing. But that is certainly very interesting. That I wonder whether there will be a backlash. But yeah, vaping is huge. Like, people love vaping.
Yeah, and that ban, I mean, I haven't noticed the difference in people not using disposable vapes. I mean, I don't vape, so I'm not sure I can recognise one from the other, but I'm sure some of the ones that I see hanging out people's gobs in the street are the ones they throw away with USB batteries in them, Jamie.
If you're buying it legally, brands like Lost Mary is a big one. What they've done is that they've just turned what were single-use vapes into rechargeable ones very easily, very quickly, but people aren't recharging them, you know. You could, because the price points are quite similar, they are just using them in a single-use way anyway, but they were quick to get around the issue. But then also, yes, single-use vapes are still available in some, you know, like you were talking about, the mini marts and some places on the black market.
Which is actually a sort of environmental catastrophe, isn't it? That's why we had this new law to stop the single-use ones, is they go into landfill, and in a way, maybe that's worse than traditional tobacco in that sense.
I actually remember doing this on the podcast about these things called Juuls when they were in the US, and that was a long time ago. That was maybe like pre-COVID, and about like the idea of like smoking USB sticks, and everyone laughed, and actually now look, they are everywhere. But I think Felicity's right, a lot of it is down to the flavours and the way that they were marketed, and potentially COVID, and the fact that a lot of kids were kind of left to their own devices during COVID, that meant that things like vaping, and inside, of course, they're two kind of separate issues, the smoking and the vaping. And actually, yes, maybe there's a draw to smoking again. I certainly know that, like, in the media, there's maybe more of an acceptance of, I mean, I'm just thinking about Sabrina Carpenter on the front page of Italian Vogue. She was smoking earlier this year, quite iconic. So when it's that level of publicity about smoking, you do wonder what effect it's having on young people. But I also think that probably, as I said before, I think teenagers are probably always going to smoke, and how long they stay doing that for, or how long they, how long that becomes a habit or not, is down to lots of different interventions, and down to privilege and poverty and all of those things. All
right. Well, whilst we're future gazing, Harriet, then where do you think this is going? Do you think what's happening in the Maldives will catch on here? Do you think the legislation that Rishi Sunak tried to put in place will pass here? Will it go as far as a smoke-free UK in our lifetime?
It's an interesting question because, well, what's going through the House of Lords at the moment is the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, which is actually the current government's legislation. It's a new version of what Rishi Sunak tried to introduce. But the Tobacco and Vapes Bill is almost certainly going to pass. Starmer did also try and ban smoking outdoors, but had to back down because obviously for the hospitality sector, for pubs in particular, that would have been a big problem. But we've got kind of two simultaneous things going on here, because on the one hand, there is some suggestion that cigarettes, specifically cigarettes, not vaping, is making a big cultural comeback. So it's like becoming much more ubiquitous in big Oscar-winning films. 8 out of 10 films nominated for Best Picture last year had tobacco imagery. And TV series like The Bear or Seema in And Just Like That. There's obviously Dua Lipa is very famously pictured smoking. Charlie XCX has kind of defined Brat as having a Bic lighter and a packet of cigs. And there's a sort of younger generation of what's been termed sigfluencers, like Florence Pugh and Lily Rose Depp, that are always photographed smoking, or models like Bella Hadid, and has posed while smoking. So there is this big kind of smoking seems to be cool again, and whether that's because of nostalgia for the 90s or a growing sense of nihilism among young people, or post-pandemic rebellion against this coming government regulation, or kind of the prohibition vibes, like it's about to become forbidden fruit, or just the availability of facelifts so you can kind of reverse the visible damage. We're not really sure, but at the same time, more and more people in England, as far as we know from public surveys, want to live in a country where nobody smokes. So from the last survey we've got, nearly 65% of people in England want a smoke-free country, and nearly half, so 45%, think the government isn't doing enough despite this coming tobacco and vapes bill. So I think eventually we will see it become more and more socially unacceptable, more expensive, and more heavily regulated. But then again, like, I think we can go back to what Kurt Vonnegut famously wrote, which is that public health authorities never mention the main reason many Americans have for smoking heavily, which is that smoking is a fairly sure, fairly honourable form of suicide.
The funny thing about smoking in films is that it's sort of, people are saying that it can romanticize or glamorize smoking, and that we're seeing it more and more. I find it so strange if you're watching a historical film from a time when everyone would have been smoking and no one is smoking. So my husband and I went to see Belfast in 2021, great movie. And after it, we were like, no one was smoking in that whole film. Everyone would have been smoking, like it would have been on the walls, it would have been on your fingernails, there would have been smoke in the air. And apparently when we looked it up, it was a conscious decision from Kenneth Branagh, the filmmaker, not to have it, because maybe he didn't want to influence people. But it's the same with like Oppenheimer. I mean, that's different because they were all smoking. But it's just I think there's a difference between, like, if you're seeing like models and influencers smoking today, but when it's like a historical depiction of a time gone by when everyone was smoking, I think you have to have cigarettes, otherwise it's so jarring, it's so strange.
Yeah, I suspect Judi Dench had been quite a sigfluencer in her time as well. So you could have just run with it. Up next, from Sabrina Carpenter, we're going to be talking about hip-hop, a rap battle, though thankfully not between our panel. That's after this. Felicity, it's your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week will be remembered for the least memorable name in hip-hop.
It touches you inside, bro. Dave is the best to ever do it. I don't want no slander on Dave. UK, you lot. I don't want to hear anything about his new album being mid. Listen to the lyric. Masterpiece, bro. First track, I've replayed it 10 times.
Bouncer Play Dirty, the CEO of Play Dirty Music, sharing his thoughts on the latest album by whom, Felicity, if we didn't catch it?
Dave the rapper. Yeah, Santan Dave, who has become the first UK rapper to debut 3 albums at number 1.
Because Stormzy's third album got to number 2, by the way.
Yes, good knowledge. Good knowledge.
So still close race, but yeah, okay, fair enough. He's done it. Yeah.
And I think there are similarities between the two, which we can come on to. But yeah, Dave has pipped him to the post. His latest album is called The Boy Who Played the Harp, which is a religious reference to King David from the Bible, who Dave was also named after. And there's a lot of religious imagery and lyrics about his faith running throughout the album, which is interesting. It's no mean feat. It's we're in the era of a new Taylor Swift album, and yet he's managed to knock Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl off the top spot, and he's fended off competition from Lily Allen, which she's getting a lot of talk and a lot of hype about. So it's a big deal. And his 2 other albums have now crept back into the top 40, so he's the first British rap act to have 3 entries in the chart simultaneously.
And also, no shade on Lily Allen, but Lily Allen's music exists in a social media hype bubble, doesn't it? Taylor Swift is a global phenomenon, as we've discussed before, whereas it seems to me that the people who are enjoying Dave's album are actually listening to it carefully and commenting on what he's saying.
Yeah, 100%. I've seen so many videos on YouTube and comments which are just talking about his poetry and his lyricism and how introspective it is. And some of it is beautiful. He's got a real social conscience, again, similar to Stormzy. So he's talking about what's going on in the world. He's talking about politics and poverty. He says at one point, "How am I trying to pray for Congo with these diamonds on my neck? I'm in church, but I'm more worried about the service on my phone." There's a really great track called No Weapons, which is a verse from Isaiah, which is "No weapons fashioned against me shall prosper." All the reviews have been 5-star, this is a masterpiece, but all the reviews are saying this is more introspective. This is a kind of tormented man sort of grappling with fame, but also his origins, where he's come from. So it's pretty deep.
And also, therefore, Jamie, distinct, maybe, from what you hear from the other side of the pond.
Yeah. I think, we could go into in depth the kind of history of UK rap, but there was a period of time where it was trying to mimic US hip hop. So the trap music came in, but now, certainly in kind of more recent times, there has been a lot of kind of focus in UK raps on things like local identity and authenticity. And if you look at the people on the album that Dave works with, there are some really big names, but also, Kano, James Blake, Thames, these are big names in music, but there's also a guy called Jim Legacy who, this is just my own personal opinion, but his album that he put out recently is one of the best albums I've ever heard, and I would really recommend people listen to it. The distinctness is that it is about embracing kind of UK English dialects, and it's interesting, obviously, as we're talking about the rise of UK rap, that actually last week it was in the US, it was reported for the first time in over 35 years there was no rap song in the top 40. Megan Thee Stallion has actually come into the top 40 of the Billboard Hot 100 this week, so that's no longer the case. But the exit of Luther, which was Kendrick Lamar and SZA's song, triggered an incredible milestone. 35 years. And I guess the question is, what does that mean? Is the end of US rap commercial dominance, or is this just a blip?
Yeah, that is fascinating, isn't it, Harriet? This is a run of rap songs in the Billboard Top 100 that started with Vanilla Ice and Ice Ice Baby came to an end.
To be fair, though, just because the top 40 on the Hot 100 didn't contain a single rap song for a week or two, it still had rappers on it. So we're not saying that rappers just disappeared from it. But I've got to push back a little bit on the implication that the mainstay of US hip hop at the moment is about lifestyle and not about introspection or identity or whatever. Because I don't think that you could say that about Kendrick Lamar, who is renowned for his incredibly clever, powerful lyrics. He's noted as a lyricist. I certainly don't think you could say that historically. For me, Dave's lyrics are very reminiscent of songs like Ghetto Gospel, Tupac's song, or even Jesus Walks from Kanye West as well, back in the day. It would be too much of a generalization to imply that all US hip hop is now all about bling. But at the same time,
they're not called Dave and Jim, though, are they? I mean, all the people you've just named have more glamorous projections than our rappers seem to.
Drake, obviously Drake is the Canadian artist, but I don't think that Drake is a particularly glamorous name. I think that both that the picture in the UK is different in terms that hip hop is at this incredible high, that they think hip hop and rap accounts for more than a fifth of all single track consumption. So that's the second most consumed genre after pop. And a lot of that, about a third of it, more than a third, comes from British artists. So even going back to the rise of grime, like when I was a teenager and I was listening to like Dot Rotten and Wiley and like kind of Dizzy Rascal a little bit, and then Stormzy kind of popularized the grime genre quite a lot. I don't think that we should either denigrate US hip hop, which still has so much variety and so much talent historically and currently, and just how great and popular that UK hip hop and rap has become over the past 20 years.
Okay. I mean, there's also, I guess, Felicity, something missing from the charts at the moment, which I say as someone who very much grew up in the 80s and 90s, which was that it used to be a mainstay of pop that you'd have a rap interlude, right? You'd have even a cheesy Europop song would have, typically a man come on and rap some lyrics over the middle of it, which, like I say, even in NAF songs we all remember by the likes of Clock and Aqua was the mode. That doesn't happen now. Like, Dave has reached number one with a rap record. It is a pure rap record. And I'm trying to think the last time I heard, I guess Burna Boy and Little Sims were on Pray by Coldplay, weren't they? I'm trying to think of the last big hit by a sort of rock or pop group that featured rap. Maybe that's the reason that it's not cutting through in the US so much anymore, because you've got less of that collaboration.
Partly. I mean, British rap is just on a meteoric rise anyway, so Dave doesn't really need anyone else. I mean, he has done... He worked very closely with Drake and Central C and all sorts of other artists within the rap world. But yeah, he has shown that he is masterful enough that he can release hit tracks, one after the other by himself. But I mean, collaborations are still happening across genres. So a big hit recently has been Big X the Plug and Ella Langley's Hell at Night, which he's riding quite high in the charts. But that is certainly how some rap artists are actually staying in the top 100, is because they are teaming up with other genres. I saw someone argue that actually K-pop Demon Hunters, which is K-pop Demon Hunters and Taylor Swift are kind of the reason that no one else is getting very high in the charts, because like all of Taylor Swift's new album is in there. I saw someone argue that both with K-pop Demon Hunters and Taylor Swift, there's actually is some rapping within those, which I thought was kind of a weak argument, because it's just like, it's not the same thing. But it does lend itself to the point that a lot of people were saying actually rap in the US has just gone too commercial and too mainstream, but the underground rap and hip hop scene is huge, and there's been so many releases this year and so many albums, and a lot of people's response to this whole kind of hysteria in the US about this story has been that actually who cares about Billboard, who cares about how they, what metrics they use to measure success. There's actually been so many album drops this year, and there is so much going on in the scene that it's certainly not the case that US rap is dead. It's just so interesting that it is now in the charts in such a big way over here, and British rap has really found its groove and has become really about local storytelling, and it is a kind of quintessentially British thing now. We are no longer aping American rap.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you see that with UK country artists as well, though, Jamie, don't you? Which we've talked about too. In a way, there's less burden in this country, like there is in the States, for genres to be separated. And I wonder as well if that plays a part. You do hear Stormzy on radio too. They don't have that in the US. You're either into basically what they think of as black music, or you're into rock or country.
Yeah, and I think that's also slightly to do with the kind of sheer number of different radio stations there are in the US, and the way it's divided up by genre, and how people kind of focus on the genre depending on the area in the country and all of that stuff. I also think it's interesting and true of like that concept of how now like people are across the mainstream. Stormzy will be on Graham Norton. Dave will probably be on Graham Norton with this album. Like there is a much more willingness within the mainstream, taste makers, if that's the phrase that you can use, in it to feature rap and black artists, which is a really great thing. I guess the question is, if you are comparing it to the US, and I know we've kind of touched on the fact that Drake said British people like rap more than Americans, which caused a massive issue. I guess it is about, how many artists are really breaking through in the US from the UK, and does that matter anymore? It used to be a big thing that like UK artists had to go and break America, but apart from maybe Central C and a couple of others, there aren't that many UK rappers that are huge in the US in the same way. But actually, I'm sure if you asked them, would they care that much?
Okay, from rap to whale song, do whales hold the key to eternal life? That's next, after this. Jamie, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week we learn it is better down where it's wetter.
And somewhere out there, locked in ice, is the answer. The hunt began in 1981, when Inupiat whalers gave the biologist an ancient stone harpoon tip, pulled from the blubber of a freshly hunted whale. The relic predated European first contact, a fact too impossible to believe and too compelling to ignore.
Oh, what a voiceover I'm in. Immortals of the Arctic, a documentary from Real Wild on YouTube. For what reason, Jamie? What's the news?
Oh, just for that voiceover, to be honest.
It was good.
It's good. They were talking about bowhead whales, and it's kind of been widely known that bowhead whales can live for over 200 years in some cases, which is what them finding the old harpoon tip was suggesting, and really, really freaked them out. But this week, which I guess is the question that you asked.
Indeed, it's the format of the show, it's the name of the brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad to have you on board.
There was a study in Nature of bowhead whales that basically looked into why and how they can live for over 200 years.
And what did we learn?
That bowhead whales' fibroblast show an unusually high proficiency in repairing double-strand DNA breaks and maintaining genome integrity. I mean, basically, it means that they've got a binding protein that they found that they think that they could potentially translate into humans. So in principle, you could move this DNA or and change human cells to reflect the same aspects of whale cells. There are inevitably caveats. Obviously, the biology of humans is far more complex. They think that actually part of the thing about the whales is that they've changed so much over time due to their environment that it's not 100% clear that it would be able to be replicated. But it hasn't stopped the media, the news, everyone from getting excited about the possibility that we could live quote unquote forever, but for the next 200 years. And it ties in with the book that's out quite recently called The Immortalists, and it's the death of death and the race for eternal life, talking about Silicon Valley and tech founders who are starting to view death kind of as a problem to be solved rather than what we kind of know it as the kind of as an inevitability.
Yeah. I mean, it is really interesting, Felicity. It is something I've spotted out in the wild, this hunger for immortality. It seems kind of ridiculous at first glance, but on another podcast, I actually interviewed Dr. Andrew Steele, who writes a lot about longevity. And he was saying, if you just think about it clinically, age is the world's biggest killer. It's bigger than cancer, it's bigger than Alzheimer's, it's bigger than falling over in the bath, it's bigger than everything. So it does make sense medically to say, how do we stop people dying from aging? It's not so crazy to think about that.
I'm sure that's true. The first thing I thought of was it's just so funny to be talking about this when all the conversations are going on about legally assisted dying, and actually a push in so many countries to make it easier to end your life, and the grave implications this will have for the welfare state if we do manage to live forever was my first thing. It's just panic about that, basically. I mean, people are already living so much longer than we can possibly afford in this country. But I mean, certainly it has been, well, since forever that we've all been trying to find a cure to, you know, how to prevent ourselves from dying. But I always kind of associate it with villains. Like there was the that recent summit with like Putin, Xi and Kim, where they were like caught off camera all like discussing how they could live forever. And you're just like, oh God, no. And then you had, it also made me think of Indiana Jones and the quest for the Holy Grail, and it's that Nazi woman, isn't it, who's desperately trying to hold on to the Holy Grail. And then I thought about Brian Johnson, and he uses his son's blood.
Don't put him in with that motley crew.
Sorry, I'm not. But he uses
Brian Johnson from AC/DC.
No, the
vampire man.
The vampire guy,
on.
exactly. And it's that fact. It's like, it's vampiric. He uses his son's blood to do these like blood plasma transplants, and he has this like crazy kooky things that he does because he wants to live forever. But it made me think of like Cronus eating his own children or something. Like the whole PR around this is terrible. And the other thing I would say is that it also made me think this is because we're such a deeply secular nation now, and maybe that's changing a little bit, but many religions, and like Christianity among them, believe in an afterlife. They don't think death is the end, and they're not that worried about it. And I think there's a certain amount of fear that comes with wanting to extend your life and live forever because you're so terrified of what comes next that a lot of religious people don't have.
Well, Putin is said to be deeply religious, though, to be fair.
That's true. That is true.
And a lot of the Silicon Valley lot, there's at least a kind of ostensible crossover with Christian ethno-nationalists. You know, there is a lot of crossover between the quest for eternal youth and the prolonging the life and like historic religious symbolism. It's not just a secular thing. I think it's probably more to do with a status thing. Historically, pursuing the idea of immortality, or what it actually is, it's not that people are trying to put off death, it's people trying to preserve youth, is a status, it's a prestige, it's not just scientific. And modern biotech and kind of the Silicon Valley biohacker community, which is like a social network, like a subculture of elites, it's a big showing off of status and wealth and power and privilege, the idea of literally cheating death and preserving one's identity and one's social currency of youth as well. Like in the West, we socially value youth in a way that makes anti-aging attractive to anyone who wants to maintain status. So it's much more than just the biological pursuit of a cancer-free life.
It's also keeping your brain active, isn't it, Jamie? And you see that with, to pick an example, Joe Biden, right? There's a leader on the world stage whose end was very publicly due to age. And, you know, if you're Putin or Xi and you're looking at that, you know, it might not be about escaping mortality. It might just simply be, well, I can get another 10 years if that doesn't happen to me.
I think it's interesting. I mean, there's an obvious thing of like, yeah, I don't want to live forever. I think death is really important in our society. I think that the kind of concept of memento mori and the idea that everything dies is so important to, philosophy and to the way that society runs, and like to Felicity was saying, to the way that we can afford to keep people alive in old age and all of that stuff. That is my opinion. That's how I feel. But saying all of that, people are trying to keep themselves young. Like, I don't know about anyone else here, but I am constantly looking up skincare regimes. I've got a red light mask. I've got like all of this stuff to try and stave off the aging process. So is this not just the same thing? Like, it's just the same thing, but for people with more money.
I'm demonstrably not doing any of that.
But it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing because that's about your appearance, right? Like, it's kind of like you accept that you're going to live for a finite amount of time, but for however many years you have, you want to look.
I'm going to make the most out of looking 70 rather than.
Yeah, I don't want to look like I mean, I agree that there's a problem in society with like, oh, no one wants to look or be old, but I think it's more about just an appearance rather than saying I don't actually want to die at all.
Yeah, and I think that's true. Although I have spoken to people who say that if they were given the option of everyone staying the same age forever, they would do that. So like, if you were in a situation where everyone here could stay the same age and never die, would you be up for that?
I don't even understand that question.
We would all stay the same age.
I'm happy to press the button for me to stay at 44. That's fine. But does that mean my son's permanently 9? That'd be a nightmare.
Yeah. I'm sorry, that's the rules.
Why would I do that? No one would do that. Surely you want them to grow up.
Yeah, it's very Peter Pan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Only for Olly's children, to be fair.
I love my children. I'm just saying the idea of another 100 years of parenting them would be hard to stomach.
I think there's something we skipped over a little bit when we were talking about this story that I found so interesting, and I had never heard of this before, so stop me if this is like a really obvious thing. But I read about something called Peto's paradox, which is basically this whole puzzle, and it is to do with whales and to do with elephants as well. The idea is that big animals like whales and elephants, they should have higher cancer risks than small ones because there are more cells dividing over their longer lifespan, and that can introduce errors in the DNA code, and those mutations can lead to tumors. But for some reason, or like lots of reasons, they don't. Elephants and whales and giant tortoises do not have higher cancer risks than small animals. They actually have way lower cancer risks. So that's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. And these scientists that were doing these tests, they thought that the reason was that there's something in the whales that mean that they could have loads of these cell divisions without developing cancer. But actually that wasn't true. What they found out was that the cells were getting fewer cancer-causing mutations. So that's where they think that this protein comes into it. They think that the protein helps fix the genetic damage, and they kind of had this idea that maybe the reason the whales have so much of this protein is because they live in the really cold Arctic, and the production of this protein rises when temperatures fall. And there are a lot of people now that believe that things like taking cold showers, cold water swimming, outdoor swimming, that kind of thing, that can be very good for your health. So that could be one like tiny thing that we could all do, is take like freezing cold showers every day, but not so freezing as it gives you hypothermia.
Yeah, quality of life, basically, Felicity, rather than worrying about when you're going to die. I mean, you can learn from these studies just how to make the years that you are here better.
Yeah, and also, like, you know, I don't think these massive animals are going to be as stressed as we are, right? Stress is a killer, and they're not like smoking. We've just done a whole thing about smoking. I do look at all these people who are desperately trying to find the cure to everlasting life, and I just think it's so much stress and fear and anxiety that is propelling them on. And I think it's much better, like you say, to accept that you have, well, no one knows, I guess, how much time they have, right? But to be grateful that you're here right now, I mean, that in itself is an absolute miracle. And live your life and every day with as much, you know, gratitude and positivity, and living your life how you want to live it as best you possibly can, because you might go tomorrow, you might live, you know, we're lucky enough these days to have on average quite a long lifespan, which hasn't always been the case. But it feels so sad to spend your whole life just like desperately trying to find the cure to keep on extending it, which I find really nightmarish.
But I do find it understanding that they're looking for ways to cure cancer, though. I mean, aging is a privilege, you're right, but cancer isn't. I
mean, there's also, just finally, Jamie, the pressure on public finances. If medical research goes in this direction because individuals are financing it, there might then be pressure on the likes of the NHS to say, well, they shouldn't just be for rich people, as you were saying earlier, they should be for everybody. Everybody should be able to live longer. But that doesn't benefit the country, does it? You know, in the same way that you could argue weight loss jabs do, because those people have to have health-related problems from obesity. Just living longer would be worse for the country.
Yeah, and I think that's what goes back to what your initial saying of, like, we have to make a decision about where we want public funding to go and public money to go. I guess there's a kind of horrible dystopia in the future where a small select group of people led by Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and people like that do live forever because they're able to replace and pay for everything, and everyone else dies. But I guess at least in that world we'll be dead, so we won't be living it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the life expectancy in the UK between the richest people and the poorest people is widening. You know, we are kind of moving in that direction. The ways that health and longevity and eternal youth and anti-aging processes, whether they be cosmetic or whether they be medical, they are becoming much more the preserve of the elite. And the health inequity is growing significantly in the developed world. So we are kind of almost living in that dystopian future already.
As Woody Allen once said, it's not that I'm afraid of dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. My thanks to Harriet, Felicity and Jamie. You can follow this show for free. You can get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can watch us as well. And you can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with a trial subscription if you go to theweek.com/subscriptions. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to Unwrap next week, bye-bye.